is we're going to start installing some software. So, and we can do it on, so I'm going to your Mac, right? And John, your Windows. Okay, it's fine. We'll work on both of them. So of these guys already, have you both done Visual Studio Code?
Yeah, we have.
Okay. And did you install these enhancements? You know how to do those? Let me show you those. Can you bring up Visual Studio Code for a sec? So you see this extensions thing on the left?
Sure.
So click on that. You'll see it says enabled.
Yep.
There are a couple of really useful tools here, and you can find them just by typing in the search window. So for example, if you want bookmarks, you would just type bookmarks in here, and then you'll find the match, and then you click on it and install it. The ones I really want you to have, you don't have to get all of these. The two markdown ones you should have. The markdown all-in-one and the markdown lint. I'm sorry? It's up to you. Yeah. I have it on mine. The live server, I just heard about that. I haven't played with it yet. It doesn't hurt anything to install them. You can install them and uninstall them. It doesn't waste any disk space. So the live server is another way to run a server on your laptop, a web server. I've heard good things about it. I typically don't use it. I use a different thing, but I may play with it and see if it's better. The prettier code formatter, that's a nice one to have. It's Prettier. You don't have to do Python. I use that for AI work. And then the SVG viewer is good to have. It's this one down here. SVG for scalable vector graphics. And it's a viewer, 2.00.
So this Visual Studio Code is like IDE, right?
Yes, it's an IDE. And what's cool about this is in the last class we talked about Electron apps. So believe it or not, this app, this IDE, is really a web page that's installed and looks and behaves like a normal, desktop application.
Yeah.
But it was completely written in JavaScript and web pages.
I mean, we can code with Python too, right?
If you want, Python as a web server, you can do. I don't have much experience in doing that. I use Python for neural network math type stuff. I don't use it for web serving. As you probably know, you can do almost anything in any language. So,
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
but the JavaScript is the reason I picked the stack that we're using is that you can do everything with one language in this class. You can do the entire thing with just JavaScript. And that last one is TS-lint for TypeScript lint. And lint is another term kind of like Git. It's not an acronym. It was based on dryer lint, the junk in a dryer, the lint in a dryer. Linting tools get rid of the junk in your code. They find things that are wrong in your code.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So TS-lint, that one's a helpful one. And you can tell, by the way, you see on the right side of the column, you see where it says things like 1.2, like this markdown all-in-one. See how it says 1.2 M? Yep. And 5 stars, right? So that's clearly a biggie. And if you scroll down under, see down here where it says recommended, you can go down to recommended and it'll tell you, are there any that are recommended that you haven't installed yet? and then you can see any that are disabled. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out, by the way, this, if you see I selected Markdown, and notice that it gives me this thing on the right, this nice really pretty page, and you can see you can disable it, you can uninstall it, but you see how it's got the font, the details, the features, the contributions, the changelogs. Guess what? This stuff is all Markdown. So in other words, remember I was talking about how you type all your code in text and it'll make it pretty through Markdown. So I actually want to show you real quick. This is kind of cute. I just happened to come past it. This is Markdown for writing this equation. So if you wanted this equation to show on your web page or your PDF file, you could use this language with your keyboard, and it would emit these nice symbols.
So just kind of simplifying things, right?
It'll be really obvious. We're going to go to your GitHub in a second. When we go to GitHub, I'll show you, and you can actually play with Markdown right there. You can play with Markdown here too, as a matter of fact, if you were to just release notes. I think these are already rendered. I wanted to get an example. If you were, it's fine, we can do it now. If you were to just do a new file, and I'll just do something like, pound heading 1. If I save this as, I should have picked the proper folder, but we'll just do it. I'm just going to save it as test.md. MD is the extension for Markdown, and they may have it here. Yeah, see how it says Markdown is a file type, so MD would do it. Now, as soon as you save it as Markdown, you can see this is what it looks like. It gave me fixes because we have Markdown lint help, and if you do a preview to the side, you see how that heading 1 that I typed here, because you put the extension in for Markdown, it makes the preview over here look like that. So if you wanted to do a bulleted list, you could do things like, okay, I want to write some text. So I'm writing some text here, right? And then let's say I want to write an indentation, a line quote. This is a line quote, right? So all I had to do is put an arrow, and then it made this nice little blue bar here on the left, right? And here's the cool part. Just like you can use cascading style sheets, CSS, you can use that to change, with a few lines of code, your entire website can change its look. You can do the same thing. With Markdown, there's rules that govern how it converts, inline to, this is HTML. You're looking at HTML on the right being rendered in a little web browser, right, page. So the rule that translates this to this is like a style sheet. So you can go in there and say, hey, I want ours to look more branded to our company. I want our brand color for the background. I want, our brand's font, and so you can do all that sort of stuff. And then this text never changed. And then it instantly changes its look and feel. Now, why is this really important? It turns out that when you're doing documentation, often, just like when you're coding stuff, you need to see who changed what in the documentation. So we had 20 different developers work on parts of the release notes, let's say. If you were doing it in Word document, imagine you're doing that in Word, right? How do you compare what someone did in version 1 to version 7 in Word doc? It can be hard because if you were to look inside the Word document, you'd find that the way it's stored is very complicated. How it stores blocks of text and indentations, it's like not readable. It turns out to be this huge XML file that's zipped up inside. And before it used to be pure binary. So if you were to look at an old Word file with like a notepad, it's just gobbledygook. So you couldn't tell what was different. With Markdown, you can submit it to Git, GitHub, and you can look at who changed what, and what you'll see is, oh, all they did was add this little arrow that made it a line quote. Oh, they just changed some of the text here. It becomes very easy to see the differences, and we can play around with that today if you want, or another day. It's very easy to do. And the other thing that's really nice about it is you'll find, once you get used to some of the syntax of Markdown, you can fly. You can almost type this faster than if you were using Word, because you don't end up like going up like, oh, I wanted this to be indented, or I wanted it to be bulletized. In Word, you have to stop typing, pick up your mouse, select the text, hit the bullet, right? After a while, you find it slower than just going plus. So I'll show you an example. So if I want to make a bulleted list, right, I just type plus and a space and start typing, and became a bullet. Right? Did you see that? That's all I had to do, and that bullet it's like nicely indented. I didn't have to worry about anything. And then if I hit carriage return, there's a plus again, right? And if I want to indent it doubly, I just tab, right? And it remembers that, and then shift tab, right? So it's almost faster. It is faster for me anyway to type in Markdown than to type in Word. And the nice part about this is that with that Markdown all-in-one, there's a command. I don't know if I can find it here, but it should be a command. There's view the command palette. And down here, there's probably something. Each of your extensions has a section. These are commands that you can call in all your extensions, right? Somewhere down here is probably Markdown, right? And it's print current document to HTML. So you can click that, and it will output it. I don't know if it output it in this folder where it put, but you can go find it just did that. It just emitted the HTML. You can say, oh, go make a PDF, and it just made a PDF for you. So you can imagine in a production environment, you have all these developers, writing all this different documentation, and then you just tell your build system to, emit a website and put it on the site for the customers. They can use that to see the web instructions for the new product, a new revision to the product. You can send it to a PDF right to the printers, and the printers now print the manual, right? All from the Markdown. So if you go to GitHub, everything's Markdown. If you go to almost all these sites, all these extensions, all their help files are in Markdown.
So it's kind of like more organizing the codes.
Yeah, it's just people have realized it's kind of funny. It used to work this way, and they kind of went away from it, and went to the kind of the WYSIWYG editors with Word and doing stuff like that, and then kind of come back to this, just because it turns out to be more manageable for large teams. And we'll come back to this, but I just wanted to show you that this is Markdown. It does a great job making some pretty documents just from this kind of a syntax. And then let's see. So when we go back to our apps that we're looking to install, have you done Node.js?
I tried, but do we need to install it, or?
It won't hurt anything if that's what you're asking. You can install it, yeah. Almost all these apps, unlike a lot of the older apps, they just put themselves in a folder, so they're pretty safe. So if I go to Node.js, you should find, you'll probably see a download for Mac, Amanu, and then Gian, you'll see a download for Windows. You can pick whichever one you want. The long-term, right? Long-term support is what LTS is.
And this is the
and you can pick either one. What it's going to do, it's a pretty quick download. And what Node.js is it's it's basically the JavaScript interpreter from Chrome, kind of standalone. So you can use it to read your code, whatever you've written in JavaScript, and do things. And so it's the same thing that reads the JavaScript and does things in the browser. This will do things on your computer. The difference is that, as you probably know, your browser's not allowed to do certain things, right? Your browser can't touch your file systems or do certain things with your file system. When you're running Node on your desktop, you can give it permission to do whatever you want. So you can make it pretty powerful. Oh, and I forgot to mention the Visual Studio Code that we're using. That Electron app is using Node as its web server. So it's basically its own little website. And it's using Node.js for that. So you want to make sure that you can install Node.js. And you can tell if it's installed. I think it's just Node version. Let me see what it is. Yeah. So if you go node -- version, you can find out what you've installed from a command line. Are you comfortable in the command line, Amanu? Do you have a command app that you? Yeah. So you should be able to do the same thing I did here, which is after it's installed. Type version. Did you see that, Gian? You get the version. We'll list here. Is that too small for you? I can make this bigger. Okay, let me change that. That should be better for you guys. Is that a little easier to read? So yeah, if you go Node version. On Mac as it is on Windows, so you'll see the same effect. If I type node, it's usually like help, it shows me all the options, right? It says, hey, you can come in here.
If you write it just the help, this is programming give you the wrong, I think something. If you write direct help.
In other words, if you type node help,
Yeah.
So I wrote node. What did I type? I told node -- help, right? That part there. So if you type that, it prints all this. Right. So, and it gives you all these options, right? You see things like, and you don't have to say anything, by the way. You can just say node by itself. And you can see it has loader and experimental and heap, all these different properties and parsers and all this stuff. The ones that we've typed were version. Remember, it says print Node.js version. So we typed that. And then we typed help, which is up here. H or help. Okay. If I type it with nothing, that's what you were seeing. So if I just come in here and type node, a complaint. See, it says welcome to Node. It told me the version, but see how my prompt changed? See how this is an arrow down here? This is now running Node in my command prompt. So I could do things like, I think you can do things like, let's try 1 + 1 = no. Invalid. So I think you'd say like let x equal 1 + 1. How do I have to do this? Oh, I'm sorry. Let x equal 1 + 1. Oh, so it already knew what x was. So I can say x equals 5. There we go. Then I can say x plus equals 9. So it's going to add 5 + 9, give me 14, right? So we're actually running code. Everything I type in is now being interpreted as JavaScript code. Right, so see I did a console log. So I typed in here, I said, hey, write to the console this string. And when I hit enter, it wrote that to the console. You can do some other things like I can say, matter of fact, this is a way you can actually teach JavaScript. X can be or we can let something be an object. I can say, let my object equal, and then these curly braces. So you're
I'm not able to just download, that's why I'm just checking.
so Node won't didn't download and
Yeah,
install.
it's just like malicious, contact to the,
Is that work computer?
no,
It's home computer.
yeah, it's not.
Do you want to Google how to install Node on
Mac.
Mac? Yeah, it should be fine. I'm wondering if it's a setting. What you may need to do, 'cause I don't have a lot of stick time on Mac.
I see.
You may have to elevate yourself. You know, sudo. Are you familiar with that whole sudo thing?
Mm.
Let's take a quick look, because you definitely want to be able to install. How do I install Node.js on Mac? Here was that thing I was telling you about. This is probably what you're running into on Mac. So have you seen this before? Is this new to you, this sudo? You seen that line before whenever you've done work, sudo? Let me make that bigger.
Yeah.
You seen this sudo line?
Mm-hmm.
That means super user do. It's basically like when Jihan launches a command prompt as an administrator. That's what sudo is doing. It's saying, I'm telling you it's okay. I'm elevating myself to an administrator. If you do it without that on Mac, it's going, well, I'm trying to protect you from yourself. I'm trying to protect you from a malicious app trying to install Node. If you're telling me it's okay by doing the sudo, then I'll go ahead and do it.
So how can I change that? My command prompt?
It says, you know, like, what I did is I Googled how to install Node.js on Mac. It says required for using many JavaScript tools, creating server-side. First thing you need to do is check to see if you have the version. So you may already have it. And they talk about opening the terminal by pressing Command Space and entering terminal. Go ahead. That's why we're doing this. It's easier to work with each other, try to get this done.
I think let me do the command.
Command plus space. No, you don't, they don't want you to, they want you to say, to open Spotlight search and entering terminal and pressing enter, you're trying to do terminal.
This is the same thing, right? Spotlight search? Yeah.
So type in terminal, yeah, type terminal.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what you want.
oh.
There you go, that looks right. Okay, so then it says, when you're in the terminal, enter node space -v and press enter. See if it's got the version. See if you already have it. Right, so it was, I'm sorry, it looks like there's a space. What node
Okay.
space? No, it's found, right? So you don't have it.
Yeah, I don't have.
Right, so then it says if you do not have,
It says if you
you do have it, oh, sorry, let's scroll. Okay. Okay, so did you already download the file? I think you already did that, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so then what they want you to do, locate it in Finder and double click on it. Now, where do we see the stuff about the? Did you double click on the file after downloading it?
Yeah.
Okay, oh, and that was what that did was, unzipped
Yeah,
to the, did you put in a package and that gave you this thing?
Yes, it was. It's just, this is what happened.
Oh. See, I think you're opening the wrong thing, right? This is what got expanded.
Yeah, I did that too. I don't know what exactly is happening. This too.
Oh, look, there's a readme mark.
Yeah, I saw that. That's what I opened earlier. That's what we opened earlier.
Oh, I see, we're looking at in brackets.
Yeah.
Okay, look at that, look back to your Finder there, here. Can you make brackets go away?
This one?
There you go. So you downloaded this guy. You probably downloaded this, right, the package, PHP file?
Yeah. Shall we try that one? I tried that too.
And I'm sorry, you're not right, how do we,
Like,
it says go and double click it, so you double clicked it already.
this one?
Yeah, and what did it say? It said,
That's what I'm thinking.
can't be able to do that, not check it. Software needs to be updated. Contact is over for more information.
That's weird.
Are you on the network? You're on the network. How do you install software to see?
I mean, I've been installing. It's the first time. Like, I have a lot of softwares. I mean, like the
So
ones in the
what's-
Postman, everything. But I mean,
Well, we'll move on. We're gonna have to figure out
Yeah,
why,
yeah.
because it's gonna really, you have to get Node installed. Because if you can't get Node installed, I don't know if you're gonna have to Google why that does, because
yeah,
it seems
I
to
will
be,
figure
yeah,
it out.
seems to be non-issue. And that's, by the way, that's why we're doing it today, because you don't need Node
Mm.
today.
Mm.
By next week it will be good, but you don't need Node today.
I will figure out actually.
Okay. So the other stuff that we need to do was, we'll do, NPM, let me just see. Let me control C out of that. Okay. Is it HTTP server? Okay. So Jihan, see, I'm back in the command prompt, and I typed HTTP server, and it wasn't installed. It turns out that once Node's installed, the Node package manager will install stuff. So you can say things like npm install HTTP server. I think it's -G. See this? Check out my screen up here real quick. See how it's installing? See that stuff at the bottom of the screen? So what npm is doing is when I say npm install HTTP server, it goes and finds this application called HTTP server and installs it on your machine. Now here's the cool part. These things are all installed in a nice isolated safe way so that you can start grabbing thousands of applications and installing them, and it won't be an issue. And it's all bootstrapped in that when you ask for certain things, if you ask for this application and it needed some other libraries to help it, it automatically figures that out and loads them. And so I'll show you some more about that. But that's an important concept in this whole web world, which is, remember I talked about you're going to do all the stuff with Lego bricks. You don't code anymore, right?
Yeah.
All these Lego bricks get pulled in automatically. So if I need this big Lego brick, like HTTP server, it says, well, for me to build that brick, I needed these 20 bricks. So it got all 20 plus the HTTP server in one fell swoop, and it built up a big database. I'm going to show you, for most apps I write, it'll pull down 1,000 Lego bricks. It's pretty impressive. And what it's doing that's critical is it's saying for each brick, it knows if there's any security vulnerabilities, it knows which versions it has to have and depend on, and so it figures all that out automatically for you. It's a huge time saver. And this is true for almost all languages. If you were to work in Python, we have pip, same thing. Pip is a Python package manager. It does the exact same function. For C++ and C#, it's NuGet. There's like gem something for Ruby. Every language has got one of these things. So by next week, I'm gonna when you're up to speed, you want to make sure that npm is installed, and I'll probably send out some messages. You can try to install some of these other things. What we just installed, by the way, we just installed HTTP server, so I could just now type HTTP server, and it just launched a web server. So I now have a web server on my laptop, right? And I can just say, hey, allow this thing, I don't want it on public networks, let's say. I want it only on domain networks. But I can pick whatever I want. I'll just go ahead and say for now it's okay. And now you could ping this IP address from your laptop, and you could see, I could be serving up a website from my laptop and you could see it right now. You saw how easy that was? Right? That's a Lego building block for you. And then it says hit Control-C to stop. Web server stopped. And I can see what the stuff is, what my options are, again, by going like, I think it's -H, and it says, oh, if you want to launch this command line, you can do all these different things. These are all my options for authentication, secure web serving, whether or not to show files and listings. It's pretty impressive, right? So what you're going to find is that we're going to do quite a bit of this in this class, rather than finding all this stuff online that we have to install and do all this work to figure out. We can just type one line of code and boom, it's installed, ready to go. All right, so let's keep moving. The other things that we wanted to install were Git. So I don't know if you're going to be in the same issue with Git. It'll be kind of interesting to see. So if you go to that link that I sent, or if you just Google, Git for Windows or Git for Mac, either one will get you the same location. So I can say, hey, I need Git on here. I'm going to go ahead and download it. It's not too big, 44 megabytes. Click on install, and I can go through some of the options for you. This one's got some questions typically when it wants to install. There's the GNU license, which is typical. You're gonna say where to install it. That's fine. Here's some of the things that I think the default options are probably fine. You might want to turn off, you don't really need it. Get LFS support, you don't really need. You could turn that off. The menu that it installs to. This one you probably want to change. So it says the default editor used by Git. Because you've installed Visual Studio Code, I usually come down here and pick Visual Studio Code as the editor.
Default editor, right?
The default for that one was not the best. I usually change it. The default was Vim. The default editor, I would usually switch it to Visual Studio Code. It's okay if you pick the other thing. It's not that big a deal.
So we are installing that too?
Git, yes. Gian, you might, and again, this default's fine, but you might find the Windows default console window is preferred. It's up to you. It doesn't matter. It will work fine no matter what choices you make. And these defaults are good too. You don't want the symbolic links. File system caching is fine. Git credential manager is fine for Windows. And then let it install. So I just heard from Jonathan. Jonathan had a cough. He didn't want to freak people off, so.
The COVID is like scaring people out.
I know. Now, you have to install Git for Windows, and pros and a lot of developers will use it purely from the command line. I do not recommend that. We're going to use a utility that needed that to be installed. Once that's installed, it turns out, by the way, that if I were to go back to Visual Studio Code, I think if I relaunch it, it'll be fine. Let me just relaunch Visual Studio Code. Right. So I get a different message this time after installing it. This icon here with these 2 dots and or 3 dots and the lines, that's the logo for Git. So because we installed Git, it can do integrated source control from Visual Studio Code. So we can use the GUI there. We're actually going to install another app that's even better GUI. And you can choose to use it or not. But Git, I would say of all the things that we're going to go over, Git is the most confusing. It's also the one you're most likely to use for non-web work, because they're using this for documentation management and a bunch of other things, right? When you go to GitHub, it's the same stuff. For whatever reason, everything I've read that tries to explain Git to me confused me as a new person to it. After using it for a while and learning kind of the hard way, I think I can explain it better than the way most of these folks explain it. But with that installed, you can go to Atlassian, or you could search, I think if you search SourceTree, I think I've got the link in there, right? That I sent you, SourceTree.
So I figured out finally.
Oh, what was the problem?
So the problem is like I have to go to the setting, security and privacy,
Uh-huh.
and just have to let them like install whatever apps
Okay.
they download. So just matter of like
Letting it go. Okay.
Exactly.
And then you're good to go. Awesome. Do you want us to wait for you to get caught up on the node? You tell me. I don't get too far ahead of you. So
Exactly. That's what I also worried. So I already installed Git, and now I'm installing the Node.
okay, good. So we'll wait for you to finish node.
I'm actually done.
And then once your node is done, let's go into now SourceTree app is oh, that's interesting. You don't have to. I would have thought they would have to sign in for that. So go ahead and download SourceTree and install that. I should make sure I don't already have it. SourceTree, I might already have this. No, this is actually good. This is a new computer for me, so I'm installing this too for the first time. So download, I agree. And based on the time, what I think we're going to do is we're just going to finish installing stuff and getting accounts going, and then we'll play more with these next week. But I think it makes more sense just to get them installed now. So you need to, when you install this, they want you to have. Let me back up a second. So within the development world, Atlassian is a huge player. It's a company called Atlassian. They're a big player. They've captured the lion's share of development tools. And if you listen to on NPR radio, they used to always advertise on there. They have a suite of tools. A lot of that stuff is very expensive for large teams to use, but the way they market it, for just a couple of people, it's free. So for like up to 3 people or 4, 5 people, I can't remember which it is, there's no charge. So you get to use the exact same tools with all the features for a real small team. They do want you to create an account though with them because everything's kind of cloud-based. So part of the install is I have to register. So you have to make an account, create an account with SourceTree. And as you saw with this slide here, these things all need accounts, right? So you're going to need to make an accounts at all these locations. So on this one, it says you can connect to additional accounts as GitHub, GitLab, Visual Steam products once logged in. I can register. It says if you Bitbucket server, I can use. Oh, I'm sorry. I can use my Bitbucket account, and it wants me to log in, and I have to remember my account data. And I think. Okay, there we go. So. See what it does? This is what your UI is going to look like. After you've done your registration, it'll say registration complete. And when you do the install, you don't have to do Mercurial. It'll say that Git was already installed.
Yeah, there was CodePen too.
Right, CodePen, I think it's .io is the site. What's cool about CodePen is there's nothing to install. And you don't have to sign up,
If you like.
but you do want to sign up because if you sign up, then it keeps your you can bookmark stuff and you can get back to it. Otherwise, it doesn't remember anything you did. But what's so cool about this is it's got this notion of let me find one. Let's see. It mixes sample HTML with sample style sheet with sample JavaScript, and it's just enough. This was actually pretty complicated. They're usually simpler than this, but you can see what the net result is. Let me make you go away. There it is. So you can stretch this up, right? So you can see this is a button. And I can probably slide it or do something. I haven't even seen what. Oh yes, you can do this. So isn't that kind of cool? You can press it and it does that. So you can see it's changing the background of the page. It's doing that dynamic, right? And so if you wanted that kind of a cool switch to be on your web page, you wouldn't code this from scratch. You would copy, paste it in your web page, copy the CSS in your web page, copy the JavaScript in your web page, and then you could get this button to work. What I think you'll find you can do is we'll find some simpler ones. You'll see what it's actually doing. A lot of these don't have any JavaScript. They're pure CSS and HTML. I was going to see if this one had the word animate. I was looking, oh, there's SVG, by the way, right? So we're going to talk about SVG. But what I was looking for over here is animate, and I don't see it. So they're actually using code to modify the button. We'll find ones where there's no code at all. It's simply an animate. It might say something like, on hover, go from a circle to a square in 10 steps over 4 seconds. And you do that on CSS, and it would do that for you. And what you'll find is as you just playing around in here, there are probably hundreds of thousands of these. Everything from buttons to games to toggles to fonts that all have some mix of a little chunk of HTML, a little chunk of CSS, a little chunk of JavaScript. It's a great place just to kind of play around, and it's small enough that you can kind of, and you can play with this, right? You can change this code. What happens if I change, this height to 6, right? And then you just refresh it, and then you see how it changed your view. So it's a great sandbox to play with this stuff. Really good for learning little beats and puzzles. You've probably done W3 schools before. Yeah, they're awesome, right? This is like W3 schools, but it's more just on like the web page with the HTML, the JavaScript, and the CSS.
I don't know if you have here the Khan Academy.
Yeah, Khan Academy, they're great.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so Khan Academy is good for teaching big, difficult concepts. This is kind of like, I want to find something that looks cool. Like you can find these explore pages. It's like, oh, that's a cool button, or that's a neat menu, or that's a cool slider. And then you can see how they did that. And then if you were, again, maybe you're not developing your own site, but you're selling a product, and you kind of say, I want a cool button for my thing, and you say, talk to one of your developers and say, can you make this button like this for us, but use our branding over here, and and then it'll go, oh, okay, I see, I know what to do, make a few changes, and voila. And you can make the changes yourself and save it. It's called fork. You'll see there's an option in there to fork, so you can find something that you like and say, fork it, and so it makes a clone of it for your site, and now you can change it yourself, and you can publish it as your own. And it's good because it shows the attribution. It says, Jihan made a better button than Rick. He started with Rick's button, here it is, but he made it better, and now it's or different, here it is. Okay, so play around with a little bit of that. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So we'll see you next week, huh?
Yep.
We'll probably be on a trip. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll see how Jonathan's feeling.